My name's Marcus. This is Strong Not Starving, and I'm going to share something with you today that I didn't think was possible for me a few years ago. I'm currently training for a certification that requires me to deadlift double my body weight and bench press 1.25 times my body weight, all with perfect technique, while maintaining the endurance to be able to perform 100 kettlebell snatches with a 24-kilo kettlebell in 5 minutes. But looking back on how my journey with food and training and fitness actually started, I never would have been able to do this if I hadn't let go of dieting and actually learnt to train properly. I grew up hearing like the no pain, no gain and feel the burn and it's only the last rep that matters and you need to push yourself and lock in with your diet and all that. Like I grew up hearing all that. I was raised on that. And to be honest, it got me fucking nowhere, aside from having serious issues with food and body image. Because I started lifting weights and dieting and doing all that stuff because I felt this immense pressure to look a certain way. I was trying to feel good about myself because when I saw people who were in really good shape and seemed happy and were admired and valued, I wanted to feel that way. I thought that's who I needed to be in order to feel good about myself, in order to be valued. But while on that path of the strict dieting and trying to look a very particular way and thinking that that would make me feel good about myself and thinking that that would make other people, I don't know, like me and approve of me and whatever, I was constantly frustrated and self-critical. Every day I would look in the mirror and just feel disappointment because no matter how hard I worked, no matter how early I got up in the morning, no matter how many hours I trained for, no matter how strict my diet was, nothing made me look like the people I was comparing myself to. Nothing made me look like these guys I thought I needed to look like. I was constantly miserable and stressed and anxious while working my ass off, listening to all this fitness content, reading book after book after book, sometimes working 3 jobs at a time. And my weight would go through these big fluctuations. I was so stressed all the time and my whole life seemed so tightly wound that the slightest mistake one way or the other would flip me into this narrative of guilt, like, oh, I've messed up, I've screwed it up now, like I suck, I can't do this. And then what would follow that would be days, sometimes weeks of being totally off the rails. And when I say off the rails, I don't just mean like I ate a pint of ice cream or whatever. Like, no, like I would fall into these cycles of loss of control with food and binge eating and shame for literally weeks at a time, which was exhausting and actually really fucking lonely. This consumed so much of my life and my mental energy that I was lonely even in the company of other people because I was just exhausted and mentally distracted. And it's hard to connect with people and have friends and relationships when you feel insecure, when the whole narrative in your mind is centered around this, am I good enough? Or I'm not good enough? Or I feel shame. There wasn't enough left of me to just enjoy my life. And I was scared. I was really scared. I knew that something wasn't working and that something had to change, but I didn't have any better ideas. I'd never heard anything different. And I was too scared to try something different at that stage because, you know, what if things got worse, right? I was looking around and thinking like, wow, okay, I'm this miserable and things are this bad and I'm this unsatisfied with myself while working this hard to control everything, then I can't imagine how bad things could get if I actually let go. So I would double down on the control. I would double down on working harder. I would exhaust myself more. I would, quote, lock in and inevitably start another cycle of getting a glimmer of hope for a moment before burning out and crashing. But around the age of 30, after 15 years of this, I was sitting at the reception desk of a gym that I was working at in Brighton, UK. And I just had this realization that if what I was doing was going to work, it would have worked by now. I'd given it 15 years. I realized that all the different diets I'd done over the last 15 years, all the different training programs, all the early mornings, all the long workouts, all the dinners with friends where I ordered a fucking salad, it didn't get me anything. I still wasn't close to getting what I thought I would get out of making those sacrifices. And despite the fact that every book recommended a different diet and every YouTube influencer had a different program, they were all just different versions of the same fucking thing that all contradicted each other in one way or another, especially the diets. I read every diet book, and once you start going through more than 5 or 6 different books on health or optimizing your diet or whatever, you start to realize that they all contradict each other and they all claim to be the final solution for health and fucking happiness. And all of these diets would just give me a little bit of hope for a few weeks or a few months before I'd fall into cycles of low energy and binge eating and shame. All the training programs that I was doing, leaning on triple espressos to get me through them, back pain, elbow pain, wrist pain, neck pain, whatever, fasting, low carb, paleo, spending hours on YouTube every few weeks, trying to put workout programs together from all these different influencers and all these different people that all claimed they had the final solution for the world's best physique. And I realized how crazy it would be to stay that miserable and just keep banging my head against that same wall over and over again. But like I said, yeah, I was really scared to change because I thought, wow, if I'm working this hard and things suck this much, what will happen if I let go of some control? I was so afraid that letting go would just lead to everything being catastrophically worse. So I made a decision. I reached out to an old mentor, an old personal training mentor at the time, who was in his mid-50s and could move better than most 20-year-olds. He wasn't taking shirtless selfies everywhere. He wasn't posting before and after photos all over his website. He was a physiotherapist who worked for the Australian Olympic team and had been a trainer and natural bodybuilder for, most of his life. And I was looking at this guy and thinking, something is different with him. He's still happy. And I knew he'd been through some of the things that I'd been through with restrictive diets and training injuries. And yet here he was, still showing up, still great in his mid-50s. I literally emailed him and said, what I'm doing isn't working and I'm willing to listen to whatever it is you've got to say. Tell me what to do. I was really at that stage. And he was based in Australia. I was living in the UK at the time. And funnily enough, he was actually on his way over to London to teach a couple of workshops in the UK. So we caught up for a coffee. And one of the first things he said to me was, whatever you're doing with your diets, you need to knock it off. You need to chill on the dieting. He told me that a burger and a chocolate biscuit is not going to kill me, and that I needed to start training my body as a whole and aiming to strengthen my body as a whole rather than treating it like a collection of different parts that I was trying to manipulate into a specific shape. And that was the start of everything changing for me. But of course, it wasn't easy. I had decided things were going to be different. I reached out for help, but I still didn't know what the future had in store for me. Like, there were no guarantees because my whole adult life, I'd been listening to people who were making really big promises. People who would say, do this and you'll get shredded. Follow my program and you're going to look like this. So setting out on a journey where I wasn't given that level of certainty, it was unnerving. But despite that uncertainty I was dealing with, despite the absence of those promises, I couldn't ignore anymore that every time I bought into those promises, it didn't work out. I always ended up in a worse place than where I started. So I didn't have any certainty around where this new path was going to take me exactly. But what I was certain about was that what I had been doing, I couldn't keep doing that. And so around this time, when I started loosening my grip on really rigid diets and started living a little bit more, I was actually dating someone new. And for the first time in 15 years, I went out on a date and actually had a good time without being all up in my head about food. One day I messaged this girl at lunchtime and said, how's your day going? She replied and told me that she was having a terrible day and that she wasn't feeling all that great. And we both worked in central Brighton. So I said to her, okay, do you want to catch up for lunch for a hug and a burger? And she said yes. And we caught up for lunch, and it was so nice just to be able to do that, to be able to show up for someone in that way with my focus and my attention on her, rather than part of my mind thinking, all right, do I need to skip my next meal in order to make up for this burger? Or should I go for a run later to try and burn it off? Or how do I need to adjust my diet tomorrow to compensate for this? No, there was suddenly none of that. And I still remember that lunch really clearly, feeling good about myself, able to show up for someone I care about. Almost 10 years later, we are still together and married. And during this time, when my wife and I met, I was making all these changes. I knew I had to let go of the obsessive restrictive dieting and comparing myself to fitness models. At the same time, I didn't want to step away from being a healthy, strong, and active person. I also started working at a new gym around that time. The gym that I had been working at, I didn't agree with how the classes were being run, and the owner of a powerlifting gym that was just down the road offered me a place to work at their gym. And I was expecting to go down there and find this bunch of savages training 6 hours a day at an intensity that would make your eyeballs bleed. But again, I got a big surprise. Working in that gym was the first time I ever saw people make decisions about their training program using maths. And I'm not just talking about basic maths like splitting your week into 4 days and calculating the number of reps or whatever. No, these guys were building training programs using mathematical formulas, calculating the weight that they needed to be using and the effective quantity of work that they would do with specific weights. These guys would know what a training program 3 months away would look like before they got even close to it, because everything was calculated. Rather than psyching themselves up and diving into workouts and only leaving the gym when they felt like they'd done enough, these guys were managing their workload so effectively that they were showing up day after day after day without injuries, with great energy levels, and actually enthusiastic about training. One of the coaches there that I was working with by the name of Marshall Lee, he told me something about lifting and strength training that really blew my mind. It was a complete 180-degree turn on the kind of bodybuilding, hustling, high-intensity workout culture that I had been raised with. Marshall told me the purpose of barbell training is not to do workouts. It's to practice performing specific movements under load. This 180-degree turn from show up and work as hard as you can really blew me away. This shift from harder is better to this is a skill that we show up and practice. I'd never heard anyone in a gym say anything like that before in my life. The goal was always to do a constructive amount of work that would allow you to show up again, ready to train the following day. Amongst this group of guys, there was nothing to be proud of if you worked so hard you couldn't get up off the toilet or couldn't walk down the stairs after a session, to them, if you did that, that was a mistake. So I committed to these two things. Firstly, not following a strict diet. I was making an effort to get the right nutrients into me that would support good energy levels, but at the same time, I was not avoiding any foods. The goal was to get quality nutrients that I needed and be totally free to have a burger with my girlfriend without needing to compensate for it, without needing to adjust the following day or any of that shit. Secondly, my workouts, my training programs, they were no longer about doing the amount of work that I needed to do to feel like I'd done enough. Training programs were well thought out and calculated, always with that goal of having enough energy in the tank when you're done to go about the rest of your day and show up constructively the following day. This was not a squeeze as much out of every single workout as you can mindset. It was accumulate high quality work over time mindset. Also, I put a stop to checking myself in the mirror and standing on the scales every day. I didn't tell myself I'd never do it again, but I did ask myself, has this been helping? And the truthful answer to that was, well, it helped me stay in that cycle of anxiety and restriction and binge eating and blowouts and whatever. Yeah, it helped keep the old cycle going, but this was about doing something new. So for about 2 years, I put away the scales and I did not once stand in front of the mirror in my underwear to see if the new program is working. I made that commitment to myself that that is not how I'm going to measure progress anymore. At the time, there was even a full-length mirror in my office, and it was like a mindfulness exercise for me every time I walked past it to not send my energy in that direction, to not freak out and go, oh my God, I can't look in that mirror, but just to take ownership over where my attention was going and what I was willing to invest in. Gauging how well I was doing became about a very different set of things, like showing up for well-planned training sessions, paying attention to sleep and my energy levels, practicing a good sleep routine, reading before bed instead of being on my fucking phone, increasing the repertoire of meals that I could cook, getting more confident in the kitchen and finding ways to make that achievable and sustainable. That was a huge part of this, and a much more effective way to measure progress than standing in front of the mirror picking myself apart. Focusing on my relationships. Did I have energy to show up on the weekend somewhere with my wife and be engaged and actually have energy? The continued practice of moderation with processed foods or certain foods rather than falling into that clean day, cheat day mindset. It wasn't about whether or not I could avoid those foods totally or have a perfect day. I was actively practicing a new relationship and a new skill set around those foods. I wasn't aiming to try and have this streak of perfect days where I only ate these foods and never ate those foods or stuck rigidly to a specific calorie allowance. It was more about, can I include maybe a processed food or some kind of, I don't know what to call it, treat food or whatever, as part of a balanced meal, and then kind of just get along with my day. And sometimes, yeah, I would include something like, I don't know, a donut with a meal or whatever, and feel like, oh, that was good. Maybe I should, I want to keep going. I want to have more. But the active practice for me there was like, okay, chill. You can have another one at the next meal if you want. That's totally fine. So let's just wait for the next meal if you want to have something else. For me, a win when practicing a new relationship with those foods was about being able to make decisions and have different kinds of meals and different kinds of foods without one choice becoming a link in an unbroken chain that would lead to other food choices. Like, oh, I had a donut with lunch. That was really good. All right, what else is in the kitchen? I'm going to see if there's some chips, or I'm going to find some chocolate or whatever. it was about being able to pause with some of that discomfort or some of those mixed feelings and just go, I'm okay. All right. Part of me wants to keep eating. Part of me wants to have more of that stuff. I get it. That makes sense. It was delicious. Let's park that for a second, get on with the day. And if I want to have more at my next meal, I can. Regular meals and staying well nourished was really important because it's hard, almost impossible to practice these things if we're genuinely starving or feeling deprived or really hungry. So this new mindset and this new skill set around food started to emerge. Very different to that pass or fail, clean day, cheat day mindset. And the day that I realized something had changed for me with food on a really deep level, I was walking through the supermarket and I'd planned to buy chips that day. And as I was making my way to the aisle with the chips, I kind of had this weird feeling and I had to pause for a couple of minutes to figure out what it was. Because I'd never felt it before. It was weird. I was like, what is this? And when I got curious about it, when I kind of sat with that for a second, I realized it was this tiny voice, this tiny, quiet voice in me that was just like, hey, I actually don't want chips. And that blew my fucking mind. In my whole life, I had never not wanted chips. From the household I grew up in, where we had really strict food rules, to as a teenager when I could start going out and buying food on my own, to in my 20s when I was in this on-again, off-again diet cycle, I didn't ever not want chips. I was accustomed to wanting them and stopping myself from having them, but I had never genuinely just not wanted them. And this only came from feeling like I can genuinely have them anytime and it's no big deal. And that quiet feeling I noticed, that tiny voice, I never would have even heard that if I was obsessing over what diet I was trying to fucking do. The voices and feelings that guide my choices now are like these smart, quiet kids in class that are often not heard when all the rowdy, noisy kids are yelling too loud. I had to make space within myself to be able to trust these feelings and to hear these quiet voices. That space was just not there when I was trying to follow strict diets and train like a maniac and do ridiculous things to myself. I couldn't get a sense of those feelings before because the shame and self-criticism was too loud. When people say, oh, you want to be able to, do things more intuitively or this and that, whatever, those more intuitive voices and feelings, those are quiet. They're really quiet. If you're crowded by shame and guilt and obsession, you're not going to be able to connect with them. That's what I had to learn anyway for myself on this journey, that I was only able to connect with those voices. I was only able to guide myself in this way when I'd cleared away the bullshit. So the upshot of all this, like what all this led to, I'm not obsessed with food anymore. I'm following well-planned training programs that are built around the idea of practice, not demolishing yourself. Putting my time and energy towards my most important relationship and things that are meaningful to me. And of course, I feel way better about myself now than when I was following all these super strict diets and analyzing myself in the mirror all the time, finishing workouts and going to look in the mirror to try and figure out, is it working yet? Of course, I feel better about myself now than I did when I was doing all that. Also, I'm so much more excited about what my body can do than I am about how it looks. The irony of this is that my relationship with food and training has become more effective. It feels amazing to show up for some of the most challenging certifications the fitness industry has to offer and pass the tests with a smile. It feels incredible to travel to different countries and teach workshops while being able to eat local food and enjoy the opportunity to travel without feeling guilty and anxious the entire time because I don't have my special diet foods. I was always so scared that if I stopped trying so hard, if I stopped hustling so hard, if I let go of the control that I was gripping onto so tightly, that I would, gain 500 pounds and let go of all my aspirations and become this totally different person. But none of that happened. Trying too hard, obsessing, criticizing myself, working myself into a hole, that caused weight fluctuation. That caused me to get sick. That caused me to have mental health problems. Developing a better relationship with food and actually understanding strength and conditioning training, that did nothing but good things for me. I don't know what else to say. I just want you to know that if you're struggling with any of the things that I've mentioned today, there is another way. Yeah, it's a bit scary. Yeah, it requires a bit of a leap of faith. Yeah, doing things differently is unnerving, but there is another way. The Strong Not Starving community will be open in a couple of months. I still offer one-to-one coaching, but now we have this community as an option. Guidance with food, training, stress management. So if you want to try something new, we got you. And all the relevant links are in the episode description if you'd like to receive more info or read a bit more. But even if we never speak to each other, I want you to know that something other than stress and obsession is possible. Not only possible, but highly rewarding. My name's Marcus. This is Strong Not Starving. Hope to see you in the Strong Not Starving community soon, and I'll catch you next time.